You are listening to the Next Play podcast, the playbook for high-performing leaders who want to exceed their full potential. From walking on the Ole Miss football team at 5'7", 150 pounds and earning a full D1 scholarship, to coaching thousands around the world and working with massive organizations like IBM. I've learned countless lessons that I'll be sharing right here with you. Join me as I interview some of the most successful people so you too can learn how to focus on always moving forward by deciding, planning, and executing on the next play relentlessly. All right, good morning, everybody. It is a beautiful Monday morning, of course. Hope all of you are doing well, and welcome to another Monday morning motivational webinar right here from beautiful and sunny Las Vegas, Nevada, with yours truly, Richie Contartesi, here at inside of Relentless University. So super excited to have you here today, and super excited for the topic today because we've been talking a lot about habits and skills and vision and interference and accountability. And it's been a big topic, obviously, since we've been going through the Relentless Warrior framework and what it takes to actually achieve high levels of success. We are going to be talking about how to hold anyone accountable, including yourself. So we've talked a lot about habits. We've talked a lot about accountability, but how do we actually structure this meeting? Whether you're doing it with a team member, someone like an athlete, a coworker, a family member, because holding people accountable should be in everything that you do. Just like you should always have core values and a code of honor, whether it's your wife, your husband, your team members. You know, it all comes together if you want to win and get the end result, right? So today we're going to actually talk about how to structure that sit down, that meeting, what it looks like, what you want to take away from it, and just understanding that being able to hold somebody accountable or hold yourself accountable, it's actually a skill, right? This is a skill. So I know if we took a look at the Relentless Warrior framework, which we will in a minute, we've got motivation, vision, skills, habits, removing interference, and accountability, right? And I'll show you that again here in a second. Accountability is a skill. It's a skill, and once you learn it, you will have the ability to coach other people. Like you'll have the ability to ask the right questions. That's the word. And to dive down and find where people are struggling, whether it's your teammate, again, a spouse, a coworker, and to help them come to their own conclusions. And we're really going to dive into that today because this is a very powerful skill. And when you do this, you're going to be able to help a lot of people, including yourself, right? So, let's talk about the power of accountability. I know we talked about Tom Brady last week, but it drastically improves results psychologically, right? This is proven that when you have a specific meeting or you have somebody that's holding you accountable to something and you know you have to meet with them again, which we'll talk about consistency, you think differently. You take on tasks differently, right? It's just because you know you have this coming up. Like I meet with my coach every single Monday. It was at 5 p.m. until just recently we moved it to 4 p.m. But every single Monday we meet. And I could not imagine not having somebody we've met with. And we've spent so much time together here on accountability, on habits and skills. But the question is, and we've really needed to break this down, is how do we actually do it? How do we actually perform it, right? And the most successful people use it, right? That's the bottom line. The most successful people use it. What's up, Greg? I see that you joined. You look at, and right here we have the man, Tom Brady, who has more than 3 people using it, right? And so I actually take this on myself that we've spent so much time on this topic but haven't broken it down for you, right? And so that's on me. And so that's why we're doing it today. Like the people that I like to look at a lot are successful athletes and business people. So Warren Buffett uses it, right? Like the most successful businessman, entrepreneur in the world, investor, And then Oprah Winfrey is another really big one, but they all do it. They all have some sort of accountability process. They just all do. There's no way around it. And a lot of times it's more than just one. It's multiple people. Like Tom Brady has somebody who works with him on his just on his body. He has someone who's holding him accountable just to his diet. Somebody that's holding him accountable just to his play on the field, right? So there's multiple people involved, which makes it even crazier. And there's that consistency where you have to meet with them every single week. Like that's the key, is that you have it every single week, right? So we've talked a lot about the methodology, but I do want to just bring this up one more time to show you where this fits in. And it's at the very top left-hand corner, right? It's up here in the top left-hand corner. And it's after we know that we've created that motivation, the vision, we have the skills, the habits, we've removed the interference, and now it's about how do we hold ourselves or other people, our teammates, our spouse, our kids, constantly accountable, and to keep them going around and around and around, right? Because if you have a vision with no motivation, you're stuck. You're stuck. If you have a vision with no motivation, you don't do anything. If you have motivation and a vision, but you don't have the skills, you're stuck. And then we all know multiple people who have great skills, right? They have amazing skill set. They have all the talent in the world, but they can't do anything with that talent because they make bad decisions and they don't have the proper habits, so they don't do it. So then you have to form the habits. And then we know people who are motivated, have the vision, have the skills, develop the habits, but they're constantly dealing with negative people. They're constantly dealing with self-doubt. They're constantly dealing with all of these things around them that are interfering with their success. Constantly, right? So we have to remove this interference. We have to learn the skills in order to get the negative people out of our lives, in order to overcome maybe some of our own self-doubts, and move on. And then every single week, consistently, we have to have somebody holding us accountable. But Richie, I'm already self-motivated. But Richie, it doesn't matter. Like I just said, if Tom Brady needs it, if Oprah Winfrey, Warren Buffett, Michael Jordan need it, then hey, I mean, you could say you don't need it, but if you want to get to the next level consistently, and stay there, which is the hard part, then this cycle never ends because you're always evolving, you're always learning, you're always becoming a better person, you're always becoming stronger. So that's why this is so important, and this is exactly where it fits in. And so as we break down our process and how we break down the meeting itself, it's really important to understand how it works, the system, right? As you guys know, if you've got, especially some of you who've been here for at least a year now, like Andres, like, you know everything has to be a system. If you don't have a system, then it falls apart. You have to have a system. It has to be consistent, right? Because that's great if you can do it, but you have to have other people that can also do it too, right? So everything must have a system. So number one, the system is comprised of a few different parts. We'll break those down, and then we're going to go deeper into those. Okay, so number one, when you are having this type of sit down, wife, spouse, coach, athlete, colleague, manager, whoever you're having this with, it should be, whether it's over the phone or you're in person, you should have some type of reporting process, right? This could be a form, this could be a spreadsheet, but you have to have something in front of you that you're using to keep track of what you're talking about because you're going to forget, right? Like if you're meeting with your colleague once a week and your husband once a week, and you know, maybe you're a coach for a little league team and you're meeting with each team member once a week, right? Like your brain's going to go nuts, right? And if you want to help this person get results or help yourself get results, then you have to keep track of things, right? If you're in sales, for example, if you don't know your numbers and you're not tracking them all the time, then you're missing out, like, because you're never going to know where you're losing, where you're falling short, right? So number one is your setting needs to be in some type of, sitting over the phone or Zoom. That's fine. but you have to have something in front of you that you're using to report, to track, and keep track of everything, right? Number 2 is what you're actually going to do during this sit down, right? What your process is going to be, right? And number 1, it's always got to be some sort of KPI. You have to have some sort of KPI. So, for sales, for example, this is really easy. For sports, it's really easy. But sometimes in fulfillment, for example, in business, it's very challenging. And we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what are KPIs when it comes to like transformation fulfillment. And like it's really challenging. So, but you've got to come up with some sort of KPI, something that you can track, that you could start your meeting with and say, hey, I did better this week than last week, or I didn't do better. If you don't have any type of KPI, then it's really, really challenging, right? So you have to have some sort of KPI. And don't worry, by the way, I'm going to break this down and show you this in more detail. But so anyways, you have some sort of KPI and you discuss the previous week, you discuss, and then you also discuss what next steps are for the next week. So KPIs last week and what you're going to do next week. All right. Step 3 is you're going to always be constantly coaching this person or coaching yourself. It's much easier to do it with other people, right? But there's the process of, as you're going through last week and next week, there's this process of always being helping people bring out the best in themselves and come to their own conclusions, right? And so that's step 3, right? And step 4 is going to be consistency. So what you'll see a lot of people do is they'll schedule these, but they'll do them bi-weekly, or they'll do them monthly, or they'll do them, and it just doesn't work. And there's too much variability, right? They'll be like, bi-weekly on a Tuesday at 3 p.m., but then the next week it's like Wednesday at 1 p.m., and then the next, and it's all over the place. It has to be massive consistency. Massive consistency. Because remember, we want to use variability to our advantage, right? When we talked about habits, when you do something over and over again, it becomes, or like you get addicted, right? We were talking about tobacco, for example, and you end up doing it at the same times over and over and over again. And we want to use that to our advantage, but with skills, right? Like we want to use this to our advantage, but with skills. So, all right, good stuff. So what are we going to go through during the meeting? So we talked about number 1, we talked about the KPIs. You have to have some sort of number. And then I'm also going to have a PDF for you, but just if for this sake, for right now, write these down. It's very simple. This is the process I've used with my team for over 2 years now. It's been refined. I would say like legitimately narrowed it down to the simplest amount of questions for about the last year. And I actually learned this when I was working with a really big company and out in IBM, and we were constantly trying to figure out how to create this type of structure and hierarchy, and I watched them just explode. And then over time, like, I'm sure they've adapted a lot with their questions. I don't know their questions anymore, but because it changes, right? You learn, you get better, you adapt. And then same thing with myself. I started out with different questions, and I've narrowed it down to very simple questions that I've created in a process that I've created that works and gets results, right? So number 1, if you have a pen and paper, write this down. Again, I'll have a PDF, but for now, your KPIs. You got to have your KPIs that you're always going to ask right off the bat. What are the numbers? Get them into your some sort of reporting form, spreadsheet, notepad, doesn't matter, but where you're keeping that. And then you're going to talk about the last week, right? Very simple. What did you do well last week? And very simple. What did you learn? What did you do well last week? And what did you learn? And this is when you're going to talk about what they also completed the week before, right? Because you're always, at the end of every meeting, you're always discussing next steps. So you're finding out like, did you complete what we talked about? Did you not complete? That's the point of all of this, right? Is to make sure people do what they say they're going to do, right? And this is like, I mean, you're just going to watch yourself. Your numbers are drastically going to keep going up and up and up because you're focusing on it, right? And you're constantly getting better. You can only get better at one thing a week, really. realistically. But in 52 weeks or in 48 weeks, that's a lot. That's a lot you can get better at, right? So the numbers, the second thing is what did you do well last week and what did you learn? And then what didn't go well last week and why? What didn't go well last week and why? And that why is going to be the start of your discussing the following week. It's the discussing of the following week. So now you're going to go over the end, you're going to discuss the next week, right? So very, very simple. And this is at the end of the meeting, right? So what will you do this week? There's 3 questions, right? Get these. What will you do this week? How will you do it? And when will you do it by? I call it this the what, how, when. So when you're discussing next steps, it's what will you do this week? How will you do it? Because the bottom line is if people leave in the meeting and they don't know how to do it, they're never going to do it, right? So the question you're going to ask them is, what will you do this week? Very simply, because we discussed what didn't go well and why. Cool. So what are you going to do this week differently? How will you do it? And when will you do it by? And you ask those 3 questions, and they're going to come up with their own answers. And if they ever say anything like this, you hear this all the time. They'll say something like, well, I don't know. You'll get that, right? I don't know how to do that. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know. This is the best response to that, and it works like 99% of the time. And it's, okay, well, if you did know, what would you do? Because you'll get that. Well, I don't know. You tell me. But, well, if you did know, what would you do? Right? And in this next step, I'm going to share with you kind of how we're going to bring the best out of people. But so let's recap here really quick. So number 1, KPIs. Number 2, what went well last week? It's important you start with that. And what did you learn? What didn't go well last week and why? And then the what, how, when for next steps, right? What will you do this week? How will you do it? And when will you do it by? All right. So very simply, now we can hold them accountable to something specifically that they're doing. This could be a training that they need to do. This could be specific calls that they need to make. This could be a certain amount of time they're going to practice a specific skill set, like catching a football or overcoming an objection or closing or whatever, right? But it has to be tangible. A lot of people will be like, oh, well, I'm just going to work on this week. And there's no way to measure it. It has to be something that the next week you can measure, right? So just make sure it's something measurable. All right. Now, very important. When you're having this sit down, right? And this is the same thing with yourself too, right? But when you're having this sit down, it's really important that you don't tell people what to do. If you tell people what to do, like, they're not going to want to do it. Like, especially today, like, we live in the information age where people can get information from anywhere. Information is free. Organized information is cheap. Like, you have to pay for it, but it's cheap. And then having somebody work with you with that information is where it starts getting up there, right? That's what people are investing because information is free. So if we tell people what to do, then they're like, but I saw this information here and I think I want to do it differently. And they're not going to do it, right? They're just not going to do it. And so this is the difference between coaching and management. And managers are really good at telling people what to do. The problem is that their people don't want to do it, right? Coaches do this all the time. They tell people what to do. Athletic coaches or whatever type of coaches, they tell people what to do and then they don't do it, right? And so whether it's you're having these sit downs with your kids, your spouse, your colleagues, your team, coming from a place of, I want to bring the best out of you, right? This is coaching. I want to bring the best out of you. And letting them come to their own ideas, their own things that they want to do. And you do that by asking really good questions. You do that by asking the questions. And so I gave you a list of questions and how you're going to structure a meeting, but this part, this skill, coaching versus management, this is like a really powerful skill that you must develop if you want to be able to do this. And it starts with asking the questions, and when people respond, not letting them get away with things. Not letting them get away with things that they're saying that doesn't make sense. Like they'll say things all the time that contradict themselves. And the second that comes up, you have to stop and be like, hold on a second. You said this. Why is this? And the bottom line is you might be like, oh, well, they're not going to like me and this and that. It doesn't matter. Like, you're helping somebody get an end result, right? You're helping them get an end result. It's not about whether they like you or they don't like you, or it's about calling people out from their own and getting out of their own way. So many people are just stuck in their own way, and they just need that person that's not going to tell them what to do, but is going to coach them to what they want them to do, right? And so I'm actually going to play for you guys. I don't have it right now, but I'll put it inside the site throughout the week. I want to play for you some calls that I had. I had one this morning that was really, really good with a team member, and the questions that were asked, and I just got to get permission. That's why I didn't do it yet. I want to get permission to give it to you guys. But some of these calls and recordings that I have with my team that drastically change perspective and work ethic, like drastically. And that's what we want to do, right? Is just pulling the best out of people. So questions where if they say anything, I gave you the questions as a base, and you have to practice and build the skill. But it's constantly digging deeper, right? So what do I mean by digging deeper? It's called peeling. You've heard peeling back the onion, right? Like, but why? But why? But why? But why? This is like a very popular term, peeling back the onion. I think the right like psychology term is narrative therapy, and basically there's a couple things that you want to do. Number one, you want to use their name as much as possible. The more you use their name, the more they feel you're talking to them, okay? Number two, you want to use their words. If you don't use their words, you're going to have trouble. You're going to have trouble because they're not going to feel like you heard them. You know, I learned this one time, and it's really powerful, and I know I've shared this with you before. But if somebody, doesn't matter who it is, it could be a client, a potential client, a spouse, your kids, a colleague, if somebody feels like you understand their pain, their struggle, what they're going through, then they'll let you solve it. They'll pay you to let you solve it, or they'll open up to you. Like if it's a family member or a colleague, they'll open up to you and they'll allow you to bring in your ideas to guide them, right? We want them to come to their ideas, but sometimes they're not ready to do that, and they'll allow you to bring ideas to the table. And that's really powerful too, right? So anytime they say, so you ask the question, well, what did you learn last week? And they say, well, I learned that I can focus on my performance diagnostics more, or my calls more, or focus on this area of my team more. Very simply, you're going to come back and you're say, well, how do you mean by that? What do you mean? Tell me more about that. And you're going to let them share with you like what they're talking about. Cause like, we just don't know what they're talking about. Like, okay, so if I have an accountability client and they're like, oh, I want to get more like toned up this week. Let's use fitness as an example because everybody understands it and it's easy. I want to get more toned up this week. Well, I mean, you know how many people say they want to be more toned, but for you, toned means this, this, and this. And for this person, it means this, this, and this. So how am I supposed to help you get to that end result and figure out what you're going to do if we don't even know what it is? Okay, so you want to get more toned. How do you mean by, or what do you mean by get more toned? Right? So now I'm using their words and I'm diving down. I'm peeling back the onion to get to what they actually want. Well, I want to my stomach area and in my arms. Okay, so what exactly do you mean by your stomach area? And then they're going to be specific. And the bottom line is when you do this with somebody, they're going to look at you differently than they looked at anybody else they've ever communicated with because you care. Like that's a big one. Because you care. Like because you actually are taking the time to ask them these questions, and especially if this is your team. If this is your team and you're asking the questions like, hey, I'm really struggling when I'm making these specific type of calls. Okay, well, what do you mean by that? Well, is it the picking up of the phone? Is it dialing the phone number? Is it how to respond back? Is it reading a script? Is it like, what is it? What exactly is it? And you're just like constantly digging and digging. And eventually they're going to be like, well, you know what? I'm actually pretty good at that. If I just fixed this one thing, man, I'd be so much better. See, now you're coaching. Now you're not managing. And it's the same thing with your kids. It's the same thing with your spouse. It's the same thing. It goes across the board. That's what makes this so powerful. That's why accountability is so powerful. And when you create this culture of everybody wanting to get better at home, at work, your sports team, in the classroom, man, I've just seen, and I'm just so into this because I've just seen the drastic change within organizations, within teams, and I'm like, whoa, like, this is huge. And it wasn't but like 5 years ago when I go back to this, and my whole thing was all about motivation and vision. That's all I did. And now, man, I've just learned so much, and now I've seen so much that it's just so much different. It's so much different, and it's powerful, right? So next steps. And this is the last piece of the puzzle. You want to end with them. And it's very simple, the 3 questions, right? The what, the how, and the when. What will you do this week? How will you do it? And when will you do it by? Very simple. What will you do this week? How will you do it? And when will you do it by? And again, you're going to use peeling back the onion, right, to truly get to what it is that they're going to do. If they say, what will you do? Work with my team. Okay, well, hold on. Let's be more specific. Exactly what do you mean by that? Well, I'm going to work with my team on this specific thing. Okay, perfect. How will you do that? Well, I'm going to meet with them this, and I'm going to do it this, and this. I'm going to create this chart. I'm going to create this sheet for everyone to fill out. Cool. And when will this be done by? And you might have to do multiple steps. They might say, well, I'm going to do this, and this. Cool. When will the first thing be done by? When will the second thing be done by? And when will the third thing be done by? Really, it's not that complicated, right? So what will you do this week? How will you do it? And when will you do it by? Right? So that's next steps. Very simple. Don't overthink it. And you're going to get better at this as you do it, right? You're going to get better and better and better. And the last thing, and obviously is super important here, is that this never ends. That this never ends. It's a repeat until never. It's a repeat until forever. Unless you say one day, I don't want to be a better person. I don't want anything that I want to achieve. And if you look at, like, here's the thing. Like, okay, so when I did this 2-year tour, I was like I would go into nursing homes and I would ask, like, hey, what's your biggest regret? What is this? And you would kind of hear, like, a lot of times when people I would hear this a lot. When people would retire, they'd be like, I'm retired. And they don't do anything and they, like, die quickly, right? You die quickly when you do that. So this isn't just about achieving something at your work one time or winning one championship or, hitting a big sales goal or getting all your students to graduate, right? It's a rinse and repeat, because even if you do something one time, we talked about this last week with Brady, right? He's won 7. It's not, there's no end. It's the next one. It's the next thing, right? And so for you, that could be a number of things, but there's no end. And that was that video that came out. What was so powerful about that, and I played it twice last week, so if you didn't see it, watch the replay from last week, is that there is no end. There's no, like, this is it. I've become the best person I could possibly be. I've achieved everything that I've ever wanted to achieve. There's like, okay, well, what's next? Right? So the cycle never ends. What did he say? It was the pursuit of perfection. There's no such thing as perfection, right? And so that's what makes this cycle so powerful. It's constantly the game of getting better and getting to the next level. And that's why you're here, right? So for you, what's your next step? What's your next step? Andres, Natalie, Jaime, Siobhan, Mohammed, Mr. Fletcher. What's your next step? What's your next step, Greg? Actually, I already know because I met with you last week. I'm probably going to be talking to you today. But what's your next step? Right? And so as you build this culture, and for those of you that are here every week, which I see you the same people, this is your time to take what we've learned so far over the past 6 weeks and begin to implement. I said, we talked about having a success partner, which is what this is, right? Accountability partners. You can call them a success partner. I think that's more powerful. It's easier to buy into. But now you have the structure. So you do it them, they do it with you, right? And you hold each other accountable, right? And you take them through this, share this process with them, share the Relentless Warrior framework with them, right? This is it. This is what works. That's the bottom line. So my question for you is, what are your next steps? Or excuse me, your next step, right? What are you going to do? What are the questions? Ready? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And when are you going to do it by? Well, let's say, what am I going to do? Well, I am going to hold my kids accountable. Cool. How are you going to do it? Well, I'm going to start by taking the questions that I already have. I'm going to come up with a couple KPIs, and I'm going to schedule for consistency, which is really important. It's got to be every week, same time. I'm going to schedule that time that I'm going to go into my kid's room, or I'm going to go into my colleague's room, or I'm going to take my team and meet with each one of my team members. And I'm going to schedule that time with them. Cool. And when are you going to do that by? I'll do it by today at 5 p.m. Boom. Very simple. All right. Now you have people you're holding accountable. Share them with this process so they can hold you accountable. Or some of you, I'm already holding you accountable, right? So that's that. So what is your next step? And my challenge for you, as always, every single Monday, is that you leave and do something. You take action. So my challenge this week is very simple. What are your next steps? What's your what? What's your how? And what's your when for today? All right? And to write those down right now. Right now. Like when we hang up, those 3 things better be written down. And here, you know what? I'm going to hold all of you guys accountable to this. After you've written down those 3 things, and after our call here, which is about to end because I'm 5 minutes over, when this is over, you're going to go back into Relentless You and put this into your newsfeed. What are your 3 things? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? When are you going to do it by? There's quite a few people on this call. I've called out some of you. I expect this. Just do it by the end of the day today at Friday. First step. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? When are you going to do it by? All right. So it is Monday morning. It is 9:35 Pacific or 12:35 Eastern. I know I went a little 5 minutes over. I try to get done in 30 minutes. But look, at the end of the day, let's see who takes relentless action, because that's what it takes, right? At the end of the day, who's going to take relentless action? Relentless action, because your competition, it is fierce, and they're taking action, and whether you are or not, that's up to you. So this week, you have something really powerful in front of you. You have something that is going to take you drastically to the next level that all highly successful people have in place, whether they admit it or not. But I shared with you the ones that did admit it. And you're going to grow. You're going to move forward, and you're going to have an amazing, amazing week this week. So my challenge is to write down your what, your how, and your when inside of your newsfeed of Relentless University. And I will see all of you next Monday. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Next Play podcast. If you liked the show, make sure to leave us a review. For more resources, visit relentlessuniversity.com or download the free Relentless University app. And if you're interested in having me speak at your next event, visit relentlessrichie.com. Until next time.